Today on Locked On Canucks, which current Canucks will be moved out of town via trade? And look back at the 2018 NHL Draft that brought another franchise cornerstone to Vancouver. And which other teams in North American sports relate most to the Vancouver Canucks? It is Locked On Canucks on a Friday, and it starts now.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today, June the 17th edition of Locked On Canucks. I'm your host, Justin Pooney. I want to thank you for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. We, of course, are free and available wherever you get your podcast services. You can find me at Twitter at _process sports. Our show is also on Twitter at Locked On Canucks. And please also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, as I mentioned in the open, a full show today with some interesting topics. Of course, we are going to look at current Canucks who potentially could be traded and kind of rank on are you going to be positive they're going to be traded? Is it not likely at all? That type of situation. A look back at the 2018 draft as we look back at former Canucks first round picks. And the most fun one of the day is going to be which other North American sports franchises best resemble the Vancouver Canucks. So that is going to be exciting. So stick around for that. But first, I want to just dive into some news of the day. Of course, Andrei Kuzmenko has had his meeting with the Canucks. No word on anything yet, but we should be hearing something hopefully in the next week or so. The Canuck, he put on his story. He was at a fine Vancouver establishment. Wasn't at Joey's like he was in Edmonton. So that might be plus for Vancouver. So that is that. Mike Yeo, reports are indicating that Mike Yeo, as the one of the assistant coaches to round out Bruce Boudreau's coaching staff, is heating up, and he is a front runner. So again, some small tidbits of news from Canuck land. Nothing really crazy. But what could be crazy is potentially these trades that we could see. So first and foremost, the guys who get dealt that would not be shocking or it would not be out of the realm of possibility. Of course, the biggest one, the big kahuna, would be JT Miller. We all know he's about to get to the age of 30, coming off a 99-point season. And quite frankly, I think everybody in the city of Vancouver and in Canucks Nation has kind of determined or come to the realization that, hey, he's going to get dealt. For whatever reason, people's optimism of a contract extension went away with the wind. It's gone with the abyss. Many people think that JT Miller will be gone from this organization in some capacity before this season starts. Now, as I said before, I technically would be shocked because I don't know if the Canucks are going to get a deal that they want to get at this particular junction. Now, they very may, but I still have a glimmer of hope that a Miller contract extension will come through. Maybe it's just my delusional Canuck fandom in me saying that he might resign. Oh, he might take a bit of a haircut discount to stay in Vancouver. That all these reports in the media are just negotiating ploys and stuff like that. But I do believe it's going to be very. I think as most of the fan base and most rational Canucks fans, unlike myself, do believe that JT Miller will be dealt this season. The next guy I think everybody we could see get dealt, and I think everybody wants to see get dealt, is Tanner Pearson. I know I want to see Tanner Pearson get dealt. I've never been a big Tanner Pearson fan. He's been okay, but reports are indicating the Canucks want him out. They want his cap hit gone. They want him, just he's older now. He's not the fastest guy. He's a decent middle six guy, but he's not what the Canucks need. And quite frankly, for what they're paying him, he is not worth it whatsoever. The next guy who I believe should get traded, but might be a tough sell, is Jason Dickinson. Of course, he just signed a new deal last year with Vancouver at a pretty hefty price. He's still got a couple years left on his deal. And I don't think anybody's going to take that contract unless the Canucks attach a sweetener to it and another asset with some value. Because quite frankly, Jason Dickinson has zero And when I say zero, I mean zero value. He was an absolute flat out just horrible experiment this year with the Canucks. Now he could come back and could have a nice season, but the next 2 years, with that salary for what the production is, I don't think anybody's going to take him. I don't think unless there's a fool out there, and then what is it saying? A sucker's born every minute. So potentially that could be a possibility. Now we're going to look at guys who I highly doubt will get traded. First guy is Brock Besser. As I did mention before, I thought at the beginning of this offseason that Besser would be moved in a sign and trade, but as things have kind of progressed, reports are coming, of course, that the Canucks will not let him walk. They will qualify him with the $7.5 million offer. Um, and quite frankly, I think that's how it's going to be for the next couple of years. I think Besser's just going to sign his qualifying offers, and just stick with the team and make. Like I said yesterday, he's going to make 15 million bucks over the next 2 years on those qualifying offers. That's a lot more than he'll get on the open market. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody's going to offer him unless he got term. But the Canucks aren't willing to offer him term at this particular juncture. He could be traded, maybe next year, or during the season, if things go sideways and it's just time to cut bait with him. For sure this new regime is like, we're not going to sign Brock Besser. So that was another guy would be some of the younger guys, Niels Hoglander. Again, unless you're packaging Hoglander for a Miller and a pick or whatever, for like a David Pastrnak, I don't see him being moved. Again, he's a very young player. He's only 21, but he, kind of fell out of favor with Bruce Boudreau. Things weren't, all peaches and roses with him this year. He struggled, but I think he's gonna have a bounce back year, and really flourish. Now, if the Canucks want to go big game hunting and get a big name player, you might have to attach Hoglander to the, which I think if that's the case, most people will be okay with that move. Um, Tucker Pullman. I don't think Tucker Pullman will get dealt, simply because he's injured right now. His contract is not the best. 3 years, I think, at 2.5. And he's a right shot defenseman, which the Canucks need, but he's not the skilled guy they need. So I kind of put him in that same group of a Tyler Myers or a Tanner Pearson, guys, or Oliver Ekman-Larsson, guys that we would like to see get dealt, but I think he falls in more so with the Myers and OEL, where I don't think anybody wants to take that deal. Where I think there could be value with Tanner Pearson, with a veteran team that's trying to go for a playoff run. They might want to go after Tanner Pearson, but I don't think that's the case with Tucker Pullman. Um, and then we go to the guys that are absolutely no chance in hell they're going to get traded. You got the Podkolzins, the Shens. I don't think Luke Shen will get dealt, mostly because I think they want to keep him. And maybe potentially the next deadline. Now, let me tell you, Luke Shen and Quinn Hughes played very well this year. They were a very solid pairing. He's that kind of that stabilizing force. And he's, I think he's going to stick around. I think the Canucks want to keep him. They like him. And maybe in the trade deadline next year, if things are not going well and you want to sell and get some assets for him, I think that's the case. But I don't think this offseason will bring any value to trading Luke Shen. Um, then, of course, you have your complete untouchables, as I mentioned, the Podkolzins, the Horvats, the Pedersons, the Hughes, the Demko. Those guys are untouchable. Those guys are not going anywhere. And those guys for sure will be around. So coming up after the break, we're going to dive into the 2018 draft, where one of those untouchables was brought to Vancouver. But first, I want to talk to you guys about betonline.net. It is your number one source for all your betting needs, and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline remains the best for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net, is the fastest and easiest way to check all your favorite sports teams and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. Also, we have an important favor to ask you. We have put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcast. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. Take our audience survey to go or to go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you for your help. Okay, we are back. So I talked about, who the Canucks potentially trade, who are the untouchables. And one of those untouchables was the guy they drafted in 2018. The 2018 draft, of course, was following another subpar season for the Vancouver Canucks, where uh, they finished near the bottom of the NHL. In the Pacific Division that year, they finished with 73 points, 31 wins, 40 losses, 11 OTL losses for 73 points, 3 points above the last place Arizona Coyotes and 5 points below the Edmonton Oilers. That year, of course, saw the emergence of a Brock Besser who scored 29 that year for 55 points. And he kind of, showed that rocket wrist shot, and everybody fell in love with that. Thomas Vanek was a member of that year. Same with Bo Horvat, who scored his first goals. Sven Berg, Louis Eden, Mel Zotto, Derek Pouliot, Dobin, UC Jokinen. UC Jokinen played 14 games with the Vancouver Canucks that year. Alexander Burmistrov, remember that free agent signing, how that panned out? Yeah, he played 24 games for 6. Reed Boucher, Branson, Nick Dowd, Tyler Mott, guy who was a former Canuck, Michael Chaput, played 9 games. That was the end of him. And Jason Megna played his final game, or one of his final games, with the Vancouver Canucks, which gave the Canucks that horrible season the 7th overall pick in that NHL draft, which that draft, of course, featured Rasmus Dahlin, picked number 1, Andrei Shvetsnikov, number 2, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, number 3, Brady Tkachuk, number 4, Barrett Hayden, Philip Zadina, Adam Boquist. Evan Bouchard was taken at number 10 by the Edmonton Oilers. Oliver Wahlstrom was taken by the New York Islanders. Noah Dobson. Keandre Miller, the stud defenseman for the New York Rangers, was taken in that draft as well. Then, in the second round, Jet Wu was taken by the Canucks, who was a defenseman, but then a winger. But the Canucks really want him to be a defenseman. That whole debacle, which has not panned out very well. Ryan McLeod, a fourth liner for the Edmonton Oilers. Alexander Romanov for the Montreal Canadiens. But we are all here to listen and know that the Canucks, who did the Canucks pick in this draft? Their defensive anchor, their defenseman on the back end, their number 1 defenseman in the draft, in my personal opinion, that year, Quinn Hughes. And of course, Quinn Hughes, in his 205 games played, has had 165 points. And Quinn Hughes has um, been an absolute stud in Vancouver. But the biggest thing, the revision, we know Quinn Hughes is great. We know he was the right pick at number 7. I mean, looking back at this, there's nobody else really after Quinn Hughes that you would want to take that was in and around where he was picked. The Canucks got the best player. I think Svechnikov is the best player in this draft. And I think he's been very good in Carolina. But the Canucks, from considering where they were picking, picked the right player. But the reason why I want to go through these draft was because it's not so much the Canucks have missed in the first round, other than Oli Ulevi, who I said was the biggest bust in Canucks history. But the most important thing I want to get across was the later rounds. Like the Canucks drafted Jet Wu in the second round, 32nd overall. Jet Wu has played no games in the NHL, 0 games. And you had guys like Cole Lind, didn't do much. Another former second round pick for the Vancouver. So Will Lockwood, haven't really seen much of him. That is where the Canucks scouting has failed, in my personal opinion, because you have to hit on certain, second, third round picks. You look at the NFL, and I know the NFL is a bit different, and the scouting and the combine, all that is very much different than the NHL. But you find consistently diamonds in the roughs and later round picks in the NFL. You look at the Detroit Red Wings, they were able to build a dynasty on finding players in the later rounds. And that is where the Canucks scouting and player development has failed because they have never been able to develop those later round picks, so second, third round, fourth round picks to potentially just step into the minors or, step up to the big club in a lesser role. That hasn't happened yet. And sure, the Canucks have had been lucky to get, some pretty solid first round picks. But if you look at where they've been picking, they should be getting good players. And it's been it hasn't been the best for the Canucks in the later rounds. I think that is what truly affected this franchise. Yes, the Olu Levy pick kind of hindered their defense. But for example, if a guy like Jet Wu is able to step in and play in a bottom third pairing or whatever, you might not have to waste money on a Tucker Pullman or whoever, right? You would have been able to save some cap dollars, have a guy on ECL that was able to step in on a cheaper deal that was a homegrown product. Um, so I think with this new player development um, department the Canucks have put together, yes, find the first round picks that will step in and make an impact, but also focus on those later round picks and making sure that you can get value out of them. Right? There is. I've gone through the last few drafts, the last couple of days, and we've seen players pop off from later. Hell, Adam Fox and Northrup was in the third round. Right? We see other players that were taken in later rounds that have grown to be, successful players. That's due to player development, and yes, the player themselves, getting in the right situation, right opportunity, but also, you know, scouts doing the right job, finding players that might not be as polished, but you see a high ceiling there. I believe that players with high ceilings, um, I'd rather take a guy with a higher ceiling. Um, than a guy who's just has a low ceiling, but you know what he's gonna get. Like I'd rather high ceiling, low floor. I'd rather go for the guy with the higher ceiling because there's more upside. Go for the higher upside always, especially with later round picks because what do you have to lose? It's not a first round. And now with a first round pick, you might want to go with more of a certainty, but after that, you might as well try to go for the player with the highest ceiling that fits into your team structure. And I think the Canucks having Henrik and Daniel Sedin, Mike Komisarek, Chris Higgins, all those guys in the player development aspect of it, guys that have played in the NHL who weren't always, superstars right away. Now, Henrik and Daniel Sedin were top picks, but the other guys, they know what it takes to go through that grind. And having those assets in your player development will be such a huge factor to help take these later on picks and grow them and help eventually finding those diamonds in the rough guys that can, step into the lineup that are not um, that come on the cheap because that's what the Canucks need to get younger, cheaper, faster, quicker. And I think once they do that, this team will take off. And that is what I wanted. That was the biggest lesson from looking back at these drafts this week was, um, yes, they've hit on first round picks, but the later round picks you need to hit on. They haven't hit on any of that. So that's that. After this break, we're going to go to my favorite part of the show today is going to be which other NHL, no, sorry, what other North American sports franchises remind you of the Vancouver Canucks? So stick around. And we are back. Of course, this is our final segment. That is going to be other North American sports franchise of the Vancouver Canucks. So, of course, Canucks have been around for. I've never won a Stanley Cup. Have had near Stanley Cup chance. We went over that the other day. Of course, 2011, 94, 19. They have some good young pieces. At least Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser. Um, the Canadians, the Patriots, the Lakers. But they're not like the Browns, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're not the so they're kind of in that no man's land. So a good NFL would have been actually kind of Atlanta Falcons and the Arizona Cardinals. First, we'll start with they both kind of came in around time. They both kind of, for lack of a better term, during the 70s and in the 90s, you saw reach elite levels. You had high electricity players like Pavel Bure, and Deion Sanders, which were catalysts of team runs in the 90s. Then the early 2000s saw great teams, of course, or not so much in Atlanta, but very teams and very, very good teams in Vancouver with the West Coast Express and the Michael Vick experience. And saw in the later, in the early to 2010s, the Falcons had Matt Ryan under the Kyle Shanahan, where Matt Ryan won MVP, went to the Super Bowl, blew the 28-3 lead. And of course, at 2011, where they were the President's Trophy winners, Sedin's were MVP seasons, and then a 2-0 lead to the Boston in the Stanley Cup Finals. I know it's not 28-3, it's not that bad, but they still blew a lead in the final. Another, and they've all had kind of both the Falcons and the Canucks, the lack of luck. The other reason the Arizona is because they have skill. Kyler Murray's in the the Canucks, of course, have Pearson, and they put it together. They had to go through a coaching. Cliff Kingsbury, is he the guy? Had former coaches spent a lot of money and been aggressive. The Canucks did. Although for the Cardinals, kind of being signing guys like JJ Watt, Green, they did make the playoffs, shellacked by the Arizona Coyotes. Also, I've noticed that Canucks didn't start hot this year. Previously, they've got off to a decent starts and then kind of tailed off at the end of the season, which is kind of quintessential of what the Cardinals have done. And then let's go over to the one, and it's going to be kind of interesting. I think the Indiana Pacers, who've had a very colorful past. They've had chances in the finals. They lost to the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe in the early 2000s, with Paul George guys. It almost went head to toe with Miami. They've had good years most of their time, as the Canucks have. If you look at the least in the last 15, 20 years, it's been fairly decent for the Indiana Pacers, although right now they're in a rebuild. But before the last couple of years, they were a very stout franchise. Same with the Canucks. Of course, both were mired with very dark instances. Of course, the Bertuzzi incident, Steve Moore, and of course the malice in the palace between the Pacers and Pistons, which was there. Todd Bertuzzi, Ron Artest, both were very polarizing figures. Of course, Ron Artest was a much bigger character than Todd Bertuzzi. Steven Jackson. So that was the Pacers. Now, I was doing research on this, and I saw a couple of people saying that the Dallas Mavericks, because of Luka and Elias Pettersson both being young European superstars, I think Luka Doncic is on a level where Elias Pettersson's not at. We know Luka Doncic is going to be the next great player or the next best player in the NBA. We don't know that Elias Pettersson, at least at this current time, will not be the next best player in the NHL, right? And then in baseball, the Cleveland Guardians, of course, they've come close to winning a title, back to 2 Game 7 losses in the World Series in their franchise history, to the 1997 Florida Marlins, and then the Chicago Cubs back in 2016. So the Guardians and the Canucks both have had similar instances where getting to that precipice of success and losing and falling short when the games matter the most. So those were some of the franchises that kind of popped out to me in North American sports that the Canucks can relate to. So in the NFL, for the history of the whole franchise, I'd say the Atlanta Falcons are most relatable to it. Current makeup, it might be the Arizona Cardinals. Again, the NBA currently and historically would probably be the Indiana Pacers. I saw some talk with the Dallas Mavericks, but Luka, we know, is the best player or going to be the best player in the NBA, where Elias Pettersson is not going to be for those European stars. And then in baseball, the Cleveland Guardians, who again, have had a losing past, have not won a title in however many years. I think it's almost over 100 years. And they've lost 2 Game 7s in the last 25 years. So they know what it feels like. But that is that for today's episode of Locked On Canucks. A quick one, a concise one, but I hope you enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoy the weekend. Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals is on Saturday. Congrats to the Golden State Warriors. There is no basketball anymore. So as the NHL season winds down and we get ready for the draft and free agency, it's surely going to pick up Canucks news wise. So can't wait for that. Thank you guys again for making Locked On Canucks your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, Locked On NHL. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast services. Take care, guys. Stay safe, and we will talk to you tomorrow.